debate happened inside the Parliament of Singapore, where we would like to still stand on the status quo right now, where government of Singapore already having a program to importing the high numbers of immigrants to combat the population deficit inside this kind of country. We think how the status quo right now shows the progressive result on combating the population deficit in the country. For example, like several numbers of immigrants already come to Singapore and stay there or live there. They work there also and contribute on the human resources development, which is already being a background or reasons why all the government of Singapore having this kind of program. Going to my substantive first answer, why government have this kind of program? We have to analyze first why the recent government of Singapore having this kind of program that is to importing the high numbers of immigrants to combat this kind of population deficit. But before that, I would like to define what we mean by immigrant here. Immigrant here we mean that they are the people who move from other country or their origin country to stay or live in the Singapore or this kind of or other certain country in a long time answer. Firstly, back to my question, why government have this kind of program? We see how in Singapore there is a massive number of elderly people, like the cases in China and Japan, which is this kind of elderly people already lack of capability and do not contribute anymore to the country. For example, they are already in a really old age, which they already in non-productive age and do not contribute anymore or do not work and giving contribution much to the country in the terms of economic especially. Secondly, how we see the nature of Singapore societies, they think twice or do not want to having children because of many considerations. First, several considerations, for example, like the high cost of life, like the nature of house, the cost of living in Singapore is really high for a high price, and they even think twice how this can when they having a baby or having a children, it also will impact how much money they will giving to facilitate their children. Second consideration, for example, like high cost or price of education or healthy, they have to give all to this kind of children answer. Moreover, the nature of Singaporean people, besides they having a high mobility, they also a workaholic people, which they do not they do not want to be burdened more by this kind of baby since their children. Since they're workaholic, their orientation is how they would like to get they would like to get a maximum income from their work, and they enjoy enjoy their work inside the company. Next layer, why we say that it is okay for government to continue this program. First, we have to characterize what is the nature of population. We think population is a really long process that requires almost 15 years to create one generation. Moreover, like what I have explained to you before, the Singapore government is the Singapore society is disincentivized to having a children or baby by the government itself. No, so we think that this kind of condition will really prolonging. This kind of condition will really prolong the process on how this country can get a new generation to contribute in the terms of human resources that I will explain later in my later episode. So that's why we say, because of this long process, we think that we really need a shortcut term, because when people come, people will be multiplying like this immigrant this proposal, which is government importing many immigrants to come to this country. Sit down. We think we need to inject the number of people in Singapore, and in order they can work there and live there, and how they will feel comfortable to live there, and they also can contribute much toward the country. We think that it will also improve the probability to create a new generation faster rather than before. Because if the government only depend on the current society, which is they are really workaholic and don't want to having a baby or disincentivized to having a baby, the number of population will not be increasing since it is require a long process. Meanwhile, when we simply having a shortcut proposal like just importing a new immigrant, we think that this will also having a probability to improving new generation faster. No, sir. Why we think that kind of population or new generation answer. Because we think that the nature of developed country, like this kind of Singapore and United States of America, for instance, this kind of country has lots of companies inside the country itself, which is the nature of lots of companies. It also requires or needs a lot of employees in the terms of producing their product, on running their production council. Because we think that these kind of companies, moreover, they are big companies. They also manifestation for the country. They contribute much to increasing the economic or the financial condition to the country. No, sir. How they also gaining much profit and imported their product to other countries, for instance, and they also contribute on how the government will also increase, getting an increased number, of profit. For example, when this kind of country, when this kind of company opening a job vacancy, they also need human resources. They will absorb massive numbers of employees inside their country. So, moreover, this is a developed country. Singapore is a developed country, right? It is big, and because of the number of production is also big, they also require the massive numbers of employees also. We're talking about $1 billion of profit to generate the continuity of the country, especially economic, because we think that financial is really fundamental for the country. How they would like to run everything with the financial answer. We think everything inside the country also needs financial, and government also needs to this kind of budget. We think that this to generate the continuity of the country, it also needs human resources to support this production. We talk about the quantity, but even if maybe there are several immigrants who lack of quality, for example, like of skill and so on. With the government of Singapore already have an educational program and training program, which also can improve the quality of these people. Moreover, what is the harm of the population deficit if we do not continue this proposal? Because it will slowly decrease the number of profit that being gotten by government or country. Meanwhile, we think that Singapore already developed enough, and with only harming this kind of country as a whole. So we still want to propose a solution.
Ladies and gentlemen, though we have absolutely nothing against immigrants, because like any other state, you're bound to have immigrants, however, we are against the demand of influx of immigrants coming into your country to take up what your country lacks in doing, right? Because what is going to be argued by side opposition is that we feel that this is a problem-solution mismatch. And we'll also tell you why we are for the principle of the duty of the state to protect livelihood of its people. Because this is exactly what this proposal does, right? Strips off of the Singaporeans off of their livelihoods and allowing states to negate their responsibilities. But before that, right, several rebuttals. The fact that she talked about this nature of population and why the nature of population and allowing people to repopulate and give birth and increase within the pool of population, it requires a long process. If it's as urgent as you say that it is, why are you covering the problem from the people? And why are you then coming up with an easy solution, immediately saying that, okay, we'll just get a bunch of immigrants to come in and pick up the lackings of our population, right? We think that this is a problem-solution mismatch. Because if you keep on telling us that this is what's going to allow for us to repopulate, this is what's going to push people to finally meet up where the population rates should be. She never really told us how will this then incentivize individuals within Singapore, even the Singaporean state, to be able to fix themselves and allow their population to become at what is supposed to be a healthy rate. We never saw this coming from the other side of the house. All they said was they played this passing game, right? That there's a problem and here's a solution. We don't think that was a solution, that was merely you sweeping the problem under the rug and prolonging the problem. But second of all, when she talked about nature of company, she says how companies have employees and, well, you need people to run the company so that you can generate productivity. Yeah, like everybody knows that, right? But generally, with the idea that individuals that go into your local companies and are the ones taking up job opportunities and are the ones getting the money, we don't see how this is increasing with their productivity, right? Because it's not just about how much money that company generates, but it's about how much money and how much salary. It's about individuals under these companies that are the employees that get salary and be able to spend within these countries, be able to contribute back to their generation that exists within Singapore, right? Instead, what they're doing now is they're allowing immigrants to come in, take up job opportunities, get paid from our local companies, bring their money back home, leave, go back to their country, and that's about it. We don't see how this is exactly healthy for what generates our productivity, right?
Yeah.
we think like over and done with their buttons, right? We understand that there's a problem of population deficiency. However, we don't think this is the solution. Because what exactly is population deficiency, right? Like we could see that there are not enough people to fulfill the job demands because of low birth rates. But we think the solutions exist within status quo, right? Whereby governments allow for tax breaks for individuals who get married and who want to have children. We allow for the idea of promoting about the fact that we have low birth rates and we need to do something in order for our states to be able to be functioning. But moreover, right, something which even she conceded, why do low birth rates happen? Yeah. Low birth rates happen because of the high cost of living that exists within Singapore, right? Because of people that are workaholics, because of people that understand they want to be economical, even in terms of family, right? Because there are less mouths to feed. But we think that this is the exact reason why we can't just simply allow immigrants to come in, take our money, and go out, right? We think that there's a better solution. Because this goes on to this principle, right? The principle of the duty of the state. Because what? The duty of the state to protect livelihood of its people. No. What is the duty of the state, right? The duty of the state has always been about protecting the people and trying their best to provide not just food, education and clothes, but also talking about shelter. When you talk about Singapore, right, the nature of Singapore is that real estate is extremely expensive because of the small land that country has. And we're trying our best to accommodate, right? Make sure at some points affordability happens. Now what happens when you allow for a high influx of immigrants that exist within Singapore? This means more people that are foreign and not belonging to the responsibility of the state come in and they create unnecessary and unhealthy competition in terms of getting shelter, real estate, finding homes. Because now immigrants that come in, and more often than not, they don't get high-paid jobs, right? They're going to get like either middle-class incomes or low-income incomes, and these individuals are always going to strike for the homes that are most affordable and at least that are the cheapest. This means that the Singaporeans are forced to have to go into buying the more expensive homes. This means that it makes their problem even bigger. Not only are our affordable homes being stripped off away from us from people that aren't supposed to be the responsibility of the government, now we're being less prioritized by our state and pushed into having to go further in depth into the real estate problems that we have. We think if they concede that cost of living is high, and this is the exact reason why people don't want to continue alleviate the problem of birth rates, then we think this is going to push them further to realize that the cost of living is going to be even more expensive because competition is higher with individuals that by right I shouldn't have to even be competing with. We think in this circumstance you give further reasons for people to not want to correct the repopulation problem that exists. Before I go into my second level, any POIs?
Yeah, I think we have clarification. We don't think immigrants is the same with the migrant workers, right? We think migrant workers only temporary people who go to the country and then go back to their original country. But we say immigrants are basically people who stay in that country and become the citizen of that country.
Oh wow, it's really weird to hear a proposal coming in a POI, right? But we think like number one, since the motion does talk about immigrants, we do think, especially given your Prime Minister's context, that these are individuals that go back. Even better, if you're talking about citizenship, that means now you're going to loosen the idea of citizenship and simply give out to people just so that you can fix and correct the population problem. That's bad. What government simply loosens up their citizenship policy just because, oh, we need to fix a problem, right? We think that these are undeserving citizenships. Singaporeans aren't going to be happy. They're not going to want to accept the fact that now we're going to have to compete with individuals that didn't even deserve the citizenship and by right shouldn't be the responsibility of the government. Now you're cheapening even that very principle of citizenship and what it stands for and how sacred it is when it comes to the government and the relation that it has with its people. But secondly, this idea of dependence, right? Because we feel that now individuals are always going to know that there are going to be individuals that are going to pick up the lackings of our states. There's no need for us to correct because this is something that will always be backed up by the government. We think this creates a cycle. Immigrants come in, they fill up their jobs, they go back, and then later we'll have to find other immigrants to come in and fill up that gap. This is a continuous problem. Individuals will not feel incentivized to increase the birth rates problem. You're only going to create a cycle, even worse, monetary cycle, because whatever productivity that these individuals that are immigrants contribute to your state, they're going to take it back and put it in, right? Put it in back into their country. Now, what happens at the end of the day? Number one, individuals are further not incentivized to want to increase birth rates and want to help in that problem. Number two, unnecessary competition. You strip away the livelihoods because now real estate is going to be much more expensive and there's unnecessary competition. Number three, it creates some form of dependence and complacency coming from the state. And lastly, right, how now individuals at the end of the day are just going to forever be stuck in that problem. We don't think this is something we want. For all these reasons, if whatever it is, this isn't the thing that you want. This is a problem solution mismatch. All these reasons are problems.
What I see from the negative side of in this debate, basically they only criticize our mechanism, Mr. Speaker. When we provide a problem, there's a huge problem in Singapore. They only criticize the problem solving, the what we try to propose, then leave about it, then do nothing about it, Mr. Speaker. They don't even try how they can solve the population deficit in the proposal. They didn't talk about that, Mr. Speaker. Right? Several rebuttal goes to the positive side of the house. Like basically they're all talking about this is mismatched solutions. Like talking about, you will not solve the core problem on how this Singaporean will not have children anyway, so they will not be the deficit problem. Deficit population will still be happen anyway. We think this is not a mismatched solution. Why? Because we think it's really hard for now just to convince those Singaporean people, hey, right now you have a child, so we can have, solve the deficit population. No, we think it's a very hard solution. This is a very slow process, Mr. Speaker. But at least with our proposal, what we are trying to propose in this, we try to solve this problem. At least for the next 10 years, we solve this problem, Mr. Speaker. We solve the deficit population that happened in the Singapore itself, Mr. Speaker. Right? We also think that the counter proposal that will be brought to the negative side is not really mutually exclusive with our proposal. We can do all of the things that in order to solve the population deficit. Right? Next rebuttal. Talking about talking about citizenship. I think the negative side of the house is misinterpret what we are talking by our Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. Right? I think it's a bit clear about what is the immigrant, right? There's the very big definitions, a big differentiation between immigrant and migrant worker, Mr. Speaker. What you call the one who actually works the middle below workers, especially the migrant workers, Mr. Speaker. But this is very different with the immigrant. We think that the immigrant, by the definition, is the people who stay and become the citizens of the Singapore itself, right? But they talk about how our proposal cheapening the value of citizenship. We don't think it happens it happens in our proposal. Why? Because in order for you to become citizen, you're gonna have to several tasks, right? And that task, what will you do in that task? They will ask you what job you will have in Singapore, what will you do, and will you become responsible people. We think it's not cheapening, the value of citizen in Singapore, right? We try to import a huge number of immigrants, but we still do selection. We're not going to just pick random people who are homeless and then have future in Singapore. No, we don't do that in our situation, Mr. Speaker. Yes.
How exactly are you going to incentivize individuals, Singaporeans, to want to increase birth rate?
Well, at least we're gonna find that in another debate, right? But we think what we're trying to propose in this debate is when these immigrants come, especially young people who want to live with them, basically they will have a certain incentive to have children, Mr. Speaker. They just want to continue their family, continue their family legacy. Everything that new kind of family that live in Singapore that have incentive to start a new family, that's gonna slowly solve the problem of population deficit. Now let's go to extension on how the immigrant will be contribute to the Singapore nations, right? Madam Speaker, we think in status quo, right? We think in the majority of Singapore citizens are the elders one. We are aware of that, and many of them don't like to have kids, right? And the nature of elders, they don't work as contributive as the productive age people, Mr. Speaker, right? Because they have many limitations of movement. For example, they easily get sick and other kind of problems. But compared to the immigrants that we are trying to propose in this debate, the nature of the immigrants, they are young people who are in productive age, so they want to start, and they are basically people who want to start a new life and a new place that is in a very productive age. They are very productive age people, Mr. Speaker. They have a very different nature with the elders one, the majority of Singaporean citizens, right? Citizens, those people, right? They will work maximally and contribute to the government even more. And for example, on how in terms of paying tax, for example, when these immigrants have jobs, the part of their income will be taxed, and that will be form of contributions to the nations of Singapore, Mr. Speaker. Right? In terms of buying products, we think this immigrants also, when they buy products, they will also contribute to the government and by consumer tax, for example. Like when you pay rent, maybe, or also buy any foods and etc. This kind of buying products and etc. is also a form of contributions to the nations of Singapore, Mr. Speaker. That's how Singapore is a very good nation right now, good country right now, because they have very high tax in order to get to the country, so they can have high contribution to their country, Mr. Speaker. And we will achieve a good money circulations that will be achieved by the Singaporean citizens, Mr. Speaker. So what the next? Talking about what's the harm if we have the deficit of population. So we think the deficit of population is really bring harm because it slowly but sure gonna make the contributions to your governments, to your citizens, to your nations will be decreased, Mr. Speaker. Right? We're gonna make this these elders when they're not productive, they're not making children and etc. The several generation, new innovators, new employees and etc. will not be occurs anymore. This is the big problem that be created by the deficit of population, Mr. Speaker. But if you compare to the new immigrants, they are new people. They have a brand new idea, innovative people that actually can maybe make a new jobs or have a jobs there and contribute to the government in terms of tax, in terms of anything that help the citizens. So if you really care about the deficit populations that happen in status quo, and you want to solve them, go with the positive side out, not the negative side, because they don't provide any solutions. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, while we seem to have some sort of agreement on what the problem is about the low birth rate, their solution happens to be extremely short-term, and they have not taken into account the long-term ramifications of their problem, how it exacerbates the problem, and how us, in the long run, will fix it, even though it may take a while. First off, I'd like to get into the definitional mismatch between the Prime Minister and the DPM about the word immigration. The Prime Minister came in to define immigration as people who move to Singapore, and they work there for a long period of time, and then they go back. Clearly she said this.
No.
In the DPM statement, he said that these are defined as citizens, which is a mismatch, but we'll take it anyways. The problem with this is that, well, first let me get into some of the harms, and then I'll include my rebuttals into my argumentation. Now, some of the harms of this proposal are as follows. First, there is a significant loss of Singaporean identity. Singaporeans feel that they are strangers in their own land. They feel that the population of immigrants has been increasing over the years steadily, and they feel that citizenship is something that has been cheapened. They feel that this is something that has taken over their own identity and taken over their land, and this is something that they feel very strongly about, as evidenced by the fact that they've been protesting recently, which in a country like Singapore, where the government is clamping down on dissent, is a very big deal. Have a seat. And so this argument of citizenship goes against the very wishes of the Singaporean people. The second harm of this proposal is the higher real estate and land prices that will result from this immigration. When immigrants come, by the way, this is something that the government has ignored. Immigrants that come, they're often going for low-paying jobs, low-wage job, menial labor, and so they take up the low-rent areas. The higher-rent area even go higher in price because now there's such a high demand, and then there's not enough people, and there's such a high demand, and there's not enough places to fill it. So prices rise, real estate prices rise, which is actually one of the chief concerns of the Singaporean people. And this actually relates to the high cost of living, which they alluded to, and I will add an extension to later on in my speech. The third harm is the dependence on outside resources and labor from foreign countries. This goes back to the long-term solution we're talking about. What they do is they're exacerbating the problem of dependence on foreign sources of labor to run the economy. What we're suggesting is that we want to find a long-term solution so that we don't need to bring in such high numbers of immigrants into the country to fulfill the shortage of labor problem that we find ourselves facing. We feel that to do this, we need to combat the high cost of living and to combat the low birth rate that is happening in Singapore. These will be the most effective solutions to combat this problem. Another harm from the proposal is the lower GDP that goes down because income is now leaving the country. Now, I'm going to get into one of the rebuttals. They mentioned that the government will actually increase profit through immigration. Really, I don't see how that's going to happen. In contrast, GDP will decrease even with the additional tax revenue because you forget that these people who come, they're immigrants, they save money and they send it back home. Their expenditures do not equal the income that they receive. Therefore, the money that they send out is more than any revenue gained by the government through their stay in the country. And so economically, it doesn't make sense to consistently, year after year, to have this as a consistent policy to solve a problem that can be solved internally. And so we believe that this will even worsen the problem, lower GDP and lower revenue, lower the economy for the country. Now what is our solution for this problem? Our solution is obviously more long-term. We believe that the government should provide tax breaks and other such incentives to encourage population growth and to encourage people to have babies. Part of the reason that birth rates are so low is the high cost of living, as alluded to by the government and our side. Everything is ridiculously expensive in Singapore. Sure, you can say that the high standard of living somewhat maxes it, but overall, the cost of everything in Singapore discourages people from getting married and from having babies. Lowering this high cost of living will have the opposite effect of incentivizing marriage and therefore children. This will be done through the tax breaks for married couples. Now, they mentioned, I want to get into, talk about a little more detail, how the immigrants, sorry. So a long-term consequence of their proposal is that immigrants, as I mentioned before, they take the low-paying, menial labor jobs. Adding immigrants is a short-term fix, but the high-quality, good jobs that will come up in later years, and the economy of Singapore is actually booming and is growing quite fast. Those jobs will still go unfulfilled even through immigration. And the whole problem is that the labor that they're trying to fill, what are these laborers? These are builders and construction laborers that build up these big skyscrapers that will house these big financial powerhouses and engineering firms that need labor. The critical problem here is not just the short-term labor problems. The critical problem is for the country's future. What we're talking about here is raising the birth rate to combat this long-term problem, which will critically affect the country, which is something they have neglected to even propose anything to solve. All they're saying is that we have a short-term problem now, we need to bring in laborers right now to fix it in. This does not solve the long-term problem. They have accused us of our solution is going to take too long. Perhaps it will, but in the end, it does solve the problem while there's neglect to even try to fix it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a shame the counter proposal comes from the second speaker, but most importantly, and how you have to prove to me that we can also do your counter proposal, and you have to prove to me why your counter proposal is.
Singapore is a very financially sound country. How can you say that Singapore cannot afford the tax break and the incentives that we are proposing? Singapore is one of the most financially sound countries in the world right now. Their economy is booming, especially their financial industry. To say this is just that Singapore will not be able to do these proposals is ridiculous. And so this point does not stand. The next point I wanted to get into was, they mentioned that Singaporeans have to work very hard, that they are workaholics. Well, this is actually due to the fact that the cost of living is so ridiculously high. The fact that the cost of living is so ridiculously high forces Singaporeans to work longer hours and to be workaholics. There was actually a study recently that came out. The Singaporeans are actually the least happiest people as a group. Internationally speaking, just because they do have to work so high, even though their income is high on average worldwide, because of such hard working life and careers that they have to be able to support themselves. This is why they have to work so hard. And so we believe by the incentives that we propose, we will raise the birth rate, lower the high cost of living, incentivizing people to have children. Therefore, people can retire earlier, they don't have to work so hard, and in the end, GDP is higher. All this translates to benefits for the countries. What have we shown you today? Their proposal of the government is short-term, does not solve the problem, while ours does, without the negative effects of exacerbating the problem, lengthening it, making it costly for the government, and in the end, not solving the problem of low birth rate and the high cost of living, which are the central problems in this debate. With that, the opposition is proud to oppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, as long as I'm concerned in Singapore, we think that the economical situations and conditions work every day and it's very sensitive, right? When you don't have some certain job, when inside of Singapore, when they need to exaggerate the productions, when they don't have any of focus, what they expect is they expect the baby born is working in the company, ladies and gentlemen. What we're trying to do, we would like to provide a shortcut mechanism in order to generate the profit first, and after that we can generate the profit first, we will create a more sustainable for the people or individuals who live in that and breathe in them, ladies and gentlemen. But let's see the several policy in their proposal. They say that these immigrant workers that will give our money back toward their origin country, ladies and gentlemen. But the answer is, but if they go back, we think that the previous contributions is already done. Because what the government needs is the contribution by part of their tax. The rest of the money is the salary that they can enjoy, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the main resources of their salary, we think that this salary also spent inside that country because they live in that country. Perhaps, yes indeed, a half of their money goes to their mother in modern countries. We think that they still generate their money inside this Singapore country. They say that strangers in our homelands, it will disturb the existences of the Singapore people. We don't think that Singapore people is that intolerant towards another individuals. We think that they already are developed enough that they accept this diversity of individuals, ladies and gentlemen. The only reason why the tax break is not feasible is because the government of Singapore acknowledged that these low populations generates a low tax towards the government, ladies and gentlemen. Because of that, the government need to cover all costs that this government can give. So that's why the low tax will never be there for the citizen of this kind of for citizen of Singapore. The government need to have incentive to lowering this. Means that the government need to have lots of people to give tax toward the government first, and after that the government can give tax. So it is there in our proposals. Let's see what happened in the debate. Basically, there's 2 points of clashes. First, justification and practical views. Let's go to practical. First, which ones that create long-term proposals. They stated that it will create low but sustainable proposal. We need different questions. How can you get a sustainable proposal without the immigrants sending in high number in Singapore? We think that we need to empower economic sustainability. Yes, we need a long-term mechanism. And because it is sensitive, we need to fulfill every market demand. We think that every market demand is not there in the proposal, which is the high number of human resources, as mentioned before in our first speaker, ladies and gentlemen. Their only concern is the higher number of price of these houses. For example, when these individuals or foreign workers goes to Singapore and buy cheap houses, and the high number of houses becomes exaggerated. We don't think it is also much of problems, ladies and gentlemen. We talk about Singaporean societies, but do we have also market segmentations? We're also talking about these individuals who want to selling their houses. They also think about the proportionality of market segmentations, which whom that they will sell these houses, because they are profit oriented. If they don't sell these houses immediately, they will get lost, ladies and gentlemen. Even these individuals who sell is also rational enough to not put these people at this price into higher price, ladies and gentlemen. Third, they said that they said in ideas practicals that this will create sustainable benefit. We think that the sustainable benefit need human resources, and they never could answer how the human resources will be there. The only one they stated that it will not incentivize these individuals to bring inside our proposal. That will be explained in my justification. Now going to my justifications, whether or not the solutions is much. They say that the problem is high living costs that result in endangering the local societies. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, we acknowledge that because of high living costs, the one that are not incentivized will never be incentivized, ladies and gentlemen. We think that a new people will have the different mindsets of how they will try to evolve in their lives. We think that young people is very high energy, between the old people is not really energy, and having more families. They're expecting the older people to have more children. We don't think so, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the one who are actually endangering the local societies is themselves, because these individuals who can no longer work, they cannot even give any tax towards the government. Meanwhile, the government need to actually covering lots of tax. It's actually creating the catastrophes that they will never can be solved, ladies and gentlemen, with small number of people. Second point, justifications. They worry much about the competitions and the getting higher price. We don't think so, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the government, when they creating this policy, high numbers of people, they think that the government only need based on their necessities. For example, how many people did they need for the job vacancy inside Singaporean. Moreover, the government realized that this kind of things is really necessary for them to do so before their market is lost. For example, before their market is lost towards another country because they cannot fulfill the demand and they cannot fulfill the market demand and get profits, the government acknowledges that the proportionalities that they need is this, and they can generate profit to at the end go back toward the society. Before I move on, yes.
Even if you grant them citizenship, the fact that they stay and soon realize that there's a high cost of living and not be incentivized to start a family, you go back to the same problem. How do you solve the very problem you started with?
Ladies and gentlemen, we think that the problems of population is just a matter how many people that are in that countries. No matter you are babies, no matter you are what, no matter you are dog, no matter you are elder. But the point is, the problems of populations, what you need is productive populations. We think that baby have lots of times that until they reach the productive populations, right? We think that this is not mutually exclusive with our proposal. If they're being incentivized to generate their babies because of the mindset, we think it's already enough to be there in our proposal. First point of justification, the last one. They say that it will not protect the livelihood of Singaporeans. We don't think that the government of this Singapore is very evil toward the citizens, ladies and gentlemen. We think that they work as the society orientations. We think that these taxes is actually back towards these individuals of Singapore citizens. For example, they give this for the pensions rate. They give this kind of thing for the subsidies. All of the government do is for the sake of the societies. But without the existence of taxes, we don't think that the government is able to protect at the end the livelihood of the Singaporean. We think that the government is also a kind people in here, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that the government have bad intentions in involving strangers, and at the end they will not become strangers because they already have this citizenship. We believe that it is a win-win solutions between parties. Thank you. See a problematic government, right? Because there's a lot and lots of late development coming from that government. We see the first speaker coming in, telling us that we need immigrants because immigrants will work. There was somehow solve this problem or population deficit, without telling us what immigrant was. That's why it's not a smart move for you to ignore that I've been setting up to give you POI, which you do not accept. Then comes second speaker telling us that no, you didn't understand that what we meant by immigrants and we're going to give them citizenship. And it's a problem, right? Then he tries to then explain what we mean by citizenship coming from the second speaker, which is already something which is late. But even that in December, we don't think it's sufficient for you to just say that we're going to give you citizenship is fine. Because you need to then tell us in December how giving lots and lots of number of immigrants a form of citizenship would be okay. We hear from Hazim's speech as a form of protest that you can't just simply give a lot of individual them citizenship, right? And I'm going to explain to you the problem with that case also. Then all of a sudden comes this speaker who comes here then tells us this, that this immigrant come to this country, they're going to be a citizen, then they're going to work, and this is how, when they work, how this tax is going to be used. Meaning that they've been developing their case bit by bit to the speaker, ladies and gentlemen, and we don't think that's fair. All of those things come a bit late. But nonetheless, let me tackle all of it anyway, right? Because my issue can be only one, right? What are the reasons of population deficit and how do we cater to it, right? First of all, we understand that main problem of population deficit is because of low birth rate, right? And why is there a problem low birth rate? Because individuals are disincentivized from having children, right? Because those are individuals who are very much workaholic. Why they're workaholic, right? Because there's a high cost living and also because of real estate problem, right? Because they have to buy expensive house, they can have money to cater to their kids, right? This is not only the problem of elderly people, right? We don't think that having a new generation for immigration will help everything, right? Even because of the current situation in Singapore, even those who are young are disincentivized to help children because the cost of living will eventually be the same. So the problem here is not necessarily to just have a lot of individuals to enter and flood your country, but the problem is to cater to the cost of living, ladies and gentlemen. So let's look at the three things, right? Number one, they tell us how to solve the problem that immigrants can come in and work, right? What they tell you that they can work and then suddenly it will contribute to the country. That's what first speaker told you. But never did they tell you how by just working all of a sudden, problem or deficit will be fixed. Because one thing I want to question, what do you mean by population right here? What I mean by population is the very individuals who live and reside in Singapore, which are the citizens, right? Because having more individuals to work, having to compete with more individuals at the very constant all of a sudden face, because they want a shortcut solution, meaning we'll bring like thousands and thousands of immigrants to your country and then you have to compete with them. Meaning here, individuals are incentivized to work much more, immigrants are incentivized to work much more also, so both parties have no incentive to have a new generation. Meaning here, the birth deficit will also still be at that state. Not individuals who also have no reason to have family because you need to work at the atmosphere where competition is very much a lot, ladies and gentlemen. And also say cost of living will be also higher because these are individuals need to also not compete for their work, to also compete for the number of houses, right? Because we want to buy cheap houses, but we can't because it's already been filled by these immigrants and such. And now you have to find more expensive houses, you fork out more money, no incentive for you to have a kid, right? So we don't think that will work. Let's talk about the second development of their case, which is the citizenship, right? All of a sudden they say, no, these immigrants are citizens, we're going to get citizens. Number one, you need to say, there's a difference, right? Because in most countries it's like this, right? We allow for you to apply for citizenship, but we may or we may not take you, right? Because there's no proper incentive. But Singapore is different, because now they say that we need those immigrants, hence the most probable things that will happen, you will loosen up the qualification for citizenship because you need those people. Other countries don't, but you do. And we think there's a problem. That's why Hazim told you that in Singapore there's a form of protest. Protests don't usually happen, but it did recently. They felt that we don't feel like home because we see a lot of other people who aren't originally from Singapore. And we believe it's a government's responsibility to make sure that individuals do feel like home, but they're not doing it anymore. And here's also the problem that we have, right? Because it is too sudden, right? Because if you have too sudden, prices will all be hiked up and all those things, right? And we don't think it will eventually have a lot of these citizens coming in will help to solve the problem. Because it's like, you need to understand, let's draw parallels to KL, right? The reason why Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, the cost of living is so high because there's a lot of people coming in. In Singapore, there's a bit of a people, there's actually low deficit of birth rate and such, but it's still very expensive. But when you suddenly pull all these people to Singapore, how is your logic all of a sudden that cost of living will go down? We don't think that makes sense, right? Because we still need to compete much more. So, we need to have a form of gradual change that we explain later on. So we don't think having a lot of people, a lot of citizens will make anything better at the end of the day. So let's begin with the last one. Yes. First, we use of fair trade competitions. We think that the job segmentation is there for this individual. Second of all, we think that when there's high numbers of people, the supplies that done by the government of products are also higher.
No, still, you need to understand this, right? You might have more form of money, but you still don't incentivize individuals to build a family or anything. Because as you say, competition. So the focus is competition and not family. No family means no birth rate because no family, no sex, no childbirth, right? It's very logical, right? We need to understand biology a bit more. So let's talk about these things, right? Lastly, because they want a form of shortcut solution. And I've told you, if you do it in a form of shortcut, it won't really work, right? Because those effects always come in the form of sudden. Even if they are immigrants, they'll go back, right? So meaning if there's no new generation that try to extend. Even if it's citizen, there's too much competition, so you won't be focusing on that anyway. So that's why we tell you that our proposal doesn't really come from housing space, it comes from Mac. Mac told you we're going to stick with status quo. Status quo already have a form of tax, what is it called? Tax what?
Tax rates.
Tax rate. And also we also incentivize individuals, we also incentivize individuals to have a family and such. Even they consider one thing, that it might work, but it may take a long time, so it may work. And we believe that in these kind of cases, we do need to take a long time. And we can afford to take time because the condition of Singapore is stable. They do have a form of money and such. They can channel the funds to other part of the sector and ensure that cost of living is not that high. If people are more secure, I don't have to work so hard, then the incentive to build a family exists. In their model, it will never exist because their model creates too much competition. Status quo gives you the proper solution. It may take time, but we believe we can afford it and we will go with it. With that, we're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very funny when you come into a debate and you have a government that doesn't want to solve their very own problem, especially when they say in birth rates, right? The problem is low birth rates. Our burden is to not solve birth rates. We think this is very funny, right? In my speech, I'll tell you two issues. Number one, this whole idea about incentives and how which side, at least if not making things worse, if not making things better, try and not make it worse for people to further be disincentivized to want to increase their pool of birth rates. And second of all, this issue about productivity, right? First issue about incentives. What was the thing that government told you? Government told you that there's a problem. The problem is low birth rates. Why do low birth rates happen? Because of a high cost of living. And are you painting your nails? and a high cost of living, right? And they told us that the solution is an influx of immigrants. But what did side opposition told you? Side opposition very clearly told you from the very get-go that the high cost of living living in Singapore, yes, we concede is the exact reason why individuals don't want to increase their birth rate pools, right? But the paramount problem as to why the cost of living is extremely high is because of a real estate problem, whereby the supply is very low, yet the demand is very high. It doesn't make sense, the fact that now when you include in immigrants who come in, even if they're staying just for a while, but the very fact that they're still going to take up the number of houses that is most affordable at that point, and what is left for the Singaporeans is at the end of the day a higher cost of houses. We think this is the state not protecting what should be the rights of the individuals, but as a matter of fact increasing unnecessary and unhealthy competitions for these individuals. The only response that came out from that side of the house was that nobody's going to be crazy enough to want to set their houses that expensive. But funny thing is, Harris told you, that does happen in reality, not just in Singapore, but in our very own homeland, KL, right? The fact that this still happens nonetheless because of that very basic economic principle, right? But then secondly, we then asked, right, how do you then incentivize people to deal with low birth rates? There never was an engagement or any attempt to answer. Instead, they took a chickadee stance and told you that this was never our burden to begin with. We think that it was your burden, considering that was the problem that you yourself set up. But thirdly, when they think this shifty stance that this new proposal came out from the Deputy Prime Minister that we will now grant them citizenship, so that coming in and going out doesn't really become a problem. What was the thing that side opposition told you? We told you that individuals, Singaporeans, protest against this. They never agree with it. You even see nowadays in the newspapers how they never concede to this idea. They feel that there's a loss of identity. Hassan told you, right? Even worse, like we conceded on side opposition, like we explained from side opposition, right? Even worse if you wanted to talk about citizenship. Because now these individuals will stay, increasing the pool of competition with the already existing original Singaporeans, making livelihood still more expensive than it already is, making people further disincentivized to want to give birth and have sex and have a family. But even worse, now that these individuals are even asked in the POI that if these people are going to stay as citizens and they grow old and they then have already contributed, but understand that because of the high cost of living that exists within Singapore, they themselves are also not going to want to give birth, right? And you're going to go back to the same problem. This was something never responded to by side government. Lastly, on this idea about productivity, they told you that these individuals will help us because people come in, they work, they make the state more productive. What was the thing that came out from side opposition? We told you no. Money goes in, people come in, they take up money, money goes out. This is the problem with the shortcut solution, is that it's not really solving the problem, but it's you prolonging and postponing the problem, only waiting for it to arise again, even if you grant citizenship, because people are still not going to want to contribute back to the birth rates because they understand the higher cost of living. We told you from the very get-go that we want status quo, we want tax breaks, we want all sorts of promotions. They themselves said it. We can overcome this idea about low birth rates, right? It's just that it takes too long of a time, so we can't do this. Side opposition told you we're willing to wait 15 years, step by step, but if it means that finally overcoming it and not having to create dependence on labor or any form of other states having to fill up for the crap that our governments did, then we're more than happy to tell you that we'll wait. Because that's all we want, right? You make things worse, that was your burden that you yourself didn't do. Thank you.
Opposition basically think that Singaporeans are selfish people who have no child to continue the inheritance of their work, but don't want outsider take it, even though the outsider will be the neighbor anyway, eventually, and become a part of Singapore. We think this is a very bad prejudice comes from the negative side of the house. Right? We think that Singapore people is not that bad. Okay, let's just come to several reasons why the positive side of the house have to take this thing. First, like this side of the house. Right? They have a counter proposal from the second speaker, but they never tell and explain the feasibility of their proposal, Madam Speaker. I asked them in the POI how it will be mutually exclusive. We think that the counter proposal can also happen in our proposal. We can do all of the things together, but they never explain to us on how this is a mutual exclusive. I think it's a very big hole comes from the negative side of the house, Madam Speaker. But we try to have a problem there, and we have to find the best solution. If these are the best solutions that can do the proposal of the positive and do the negative proposal, then why not we do that, Madam Speaker? Right? They're also talking about how the proposal, we have to lowering the cost of living, right? I think it's a very simplistic idea that even could not be done easily, Mr. Speaker, right? Our proposal already happened and show the progressive positive income. But they say that, hey, yes, it will take a long time, but it's okay. No, Mr. Speaker, it will not be okay, especially if you're talking about an economy situations, right? When the elderly resign from the production, they will lose some workers, right? And during this time, we will need a we will face the catastrophic conditions, and the economy will basically have a problem and falling down, Mr. Speaker. Second reason why you cannot win the negative self-help. Talking about the sustainable economy, Mr. Speaker. We think in order for the Singaporeans to keep their sustainable economy, they need the human resources a lot, right? And the situation's economy in the Singaporeans is very dynamic and need a fast action, right? Which our proposal, they provide it, Mr. Speaker. They never guarantee that they can give how they're gonna get enough human resources, Mr. Speaker. We're going to wait 50 years for the next 50 years, Mr. Speaker. We don't just wait until these elders die and maybe have a baby in the grave. No, Madam Speaker, we think this is a good idea. In terms of economy, you need a very fast action, and that fast action can only be having by you follow the positive side of the proposal, Mr. Speaker. Like, we think that if you just let several 50 years or 10 years without any importing the immigrants, then you will have a very problem with your human resource development, and you will have problem in the economy of Singaporeans. Third issue is why they cannot win this debate. Like issues of value of citizenship. So they keep insisting that the value of citizenship decrease will not happen because will happen. But the thing is, will happen, and they never respond to the idea on how when you get to citizenship, it's not something like you can take it anytime you want. No, Mr. Speaker. When you want to have citizenship, you have to take several tasks. For example, what you will do, and will you have a proper job in the Singapore. Never did they respond to this idea. They kept insisting on how this citizenship can really happen and easily get done by the outsiders. Last thing, talking about the new method from the third speaker, which we think is very unfair. Talking about competition will make the standard of living get higher. We think this is not fair if you count this new method from the third speaker, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. Well, like you say, that like the negative said the House in the previous, right? Tax breaks is there in status quo, and automation also no problem because this situation will no problem because those citizens of Singapore will get money, and there is equal that they will get income that is equal with the standard of living of Singapore, Mr. Speaker. This is where it will not make any. I think there is nothing wrong with the competition. That's why those people will be just okay. The Singaporeans will okay. The outsiders will be just okay. We think this is not about how the definitions of the immigrants comes late, but this is how. But they also have a very late proposal comes from the second speaker. This is not about that, but this is how about what the best solution to solve the problem. If you want to solve the problem, go with the proposal, not with no solutions and very late solutions. Thank you.